Oh look, it's a cute, childish, innocent thingy, how nice. Oh wait, but it's actually a big, bad, scary horror thing. Oh no, how creepy. That sure was unexpected. Why do we see so many instances of this exact same trope nowadays? Seriously, it seems like every indie project releasing these days, be it a game, a comic, an animation, it has like a 50% chance of having this trope in it. I just saw that recently released indie game called Miside or Miside, I don't know. And by watching 3 seconds of gameplay I could already tell exactly what was gonna happen. It's getting repetitive at this point. Glorpus might seem like an innocent mascot, but he is actually Snorplus. He carries a very dark secret, which is a manifestation of trauma or something. But let's try and take a step back. Because even though I'm complaining about it, this trope is obviously a successful one. FNAF, Undertale, that one FNAF knockoff with a blue puppet thing, you know. There are a lot of media properties using this trope and it's working out for them. So let's analyze it and see what we can learn in order to take these elements and apply them to our comic. And I don't mean making your comic this cute, innocent story that suddenly becomes creepy and stuff. I mean breaking apart this trope, laying all the pieces on the table and seeing which of them people like so much. Alright, so the cute gone creepy trope is actually pretty modern, but its spirit has sort of always been there. I think it was born from the cultural impact of internet creepypastas. You know, with all of these stories of your beloved characters suddenly becoming demonic and screaming with ultra-realistic blood on the screen. You know what I'm talking about. I think of the collective trauma, quote unquote, caused by these creepypastas is what trained this generation to be compelled by and write these types of stories. The most impactful instance of this pre-creepypastas is the movie Child's Play with the Chucky doll, you know. You can see the DNA of the cute gone creepy seeping through that movie, even though the doll itself isn't particularly appealing. Even before the internet, there were a lot of horror stories involving possessed children and toys, and I feel like it's the same thought process as the modern trope we're talking about today. The image of a lonely little girl in an abandoned playground, at the middle of the night, just standing there and smiling. It's a huge cliche in horror. It comes from the subversion of something that should be seen as innocent and pure and making it the exact opposite, like the creepy, demonic, unpredictable, all that stuff. This modern trope we keep seeing everywhere is the natural evolution of that. It's the same feelings viewed through different cultural lenses. It's the same story adapting to be more relevant today, with new technologies. Now let's dissect this trope. The way I see it, it has two major components, the initial tonal whiplash and then the constant contradiction being depicted. The first one, the tonal whiplash, is pretty easy to understand, right? It's the shock when things suddenly get creepy. It's very important for stories employing this whole trope because it is quite literally the moment that will sell your idea. It's the moment that people wanna see YouTubers and streamers react to. It's the pivot from cute to creepy. So in order to pull it off, the audience must be at least somewhat at ease or familiar with what they are seeing up until the freakiness starts taking place. For creepypastas, that's baked into the format, right? Because creepypastas are usually by default taking some beloved media property and twisting it. So by default you are already gonna have this comfort around the story, because it's a recognizable franchise you are twisting. But if you are working with a completely original idea, then you gotta do some world building and heavy lifting. Because you cannot be half-hearted about it. The more compelling the innocent part of the story is, the harder it will hit when things start going sideways. Really take your time making the audience comfortable, because even though they know things are gonna flip 180 degrees, it will still feel more impactful if they are actually interested already, before the horror begins. The subversion will only be effective if there's something there to be subverted in the first place. And then the second part of the trope is that constant tonal contradiction. Most of the media properties using this trope manages to have that uncanny feeling of weirdness throughout the whole thing. It's kind of like hearing a familiar song but off-key and off-beat. It's taking that feeling of I know this place but something's off and using it as the spice for your whole game or show or whatever. A nice angle to approach this, for example, is nostalgia. You can make your story using nostalgic, relatable things to further this feeling of uneasiness. A lot of modern mainstream media is appealing to nostalgia to sell their movies, especially because they can't write good stuff anymore, but that's for another day. With reboots and sequels and all that stuff. So if you wanted to create this specific flavor of horror, you could take nostalgic elements like those liminal pictures of abandoned playgrounds or old media you used to like and subvert them. Not necessarily with a big bad demon with realistic blood infecting your childhood memories, but with elements just wrong enough for it to be noticeable. But I don't know, that's just one idea. The bottom line for this specific trope's flavor is to have that comfy, familiar thing, something inviting and maybe even cute, and make it wrong in some way. How you can go around making it happen is up to you, but these are the pieces of the puzzle. This trope seems to be resonating a lot with modern audiences. In other words, they eat it up and they don't get tired of it. And I get it, it's really compelling. When you have a cute friendly thing that is actually a demon, it gives your brain mixed signals. It feels dangerous, but at the same time warm in some ways. It's like pressing a lot of different buttons in your brain, and it feels, at the very least, interesting. Something you gotta keep looking at, you cannot look away. You can choose if you wanna lean more into the warm side or the dangerous side. Again, it's up to you. Just remember to have the contradiction always present on an emotional level, like you always feel there is something wrong. Now, I just talked a lot about abstract concepts like feelings and emotions, right? But let's see how they work when they're in action. Anime is full of these characters that seem innocent but are actually a 1,000-year-old demon, but that's not exactly what I'm talking about. Let's talk about internet phenomena, things that popped off in the internet thanks to this trope. An example that instantly comes to mind is the game Doki Doki Literature Club. This game really made rounds on the internet a few years ago, and it is the perfect pure example of this trope. It might not be relevant today, but it's the place where you can analyze this trope more clearly, because it's just the trope in its raw form. If you haven't played or watched someone play it on YouTube, it's basically your typical romance visual novel with cute little characters and a cozy feel, until it isn't. The game dives into a lot of meta-narrative stuff, and to beat it, you end up having to mess with the game files. It's very clever stuff, but for the purposes of this video, we're trying to understand what made it successful. And in my opinion, it was a single moment from the game that made all the difference. I'm not gonna spoil it, I don't even know if I can show it on YouTube, but keep in mind it was a character unaliving themselves. And that moment hit so hard because up until that point, the game made a huge effort to really get you comfortable. The UI, menus, music, character designs, and story. Everything is made to look exactly like a regular slice of life visual novel, with you having to choose which girl you want to romance, the festival that everyone is preparing for. It's like there's a whole game and story waiting for you. And then it just plunges straight to hell, and everything else stops being relevant. Doki Doki Literature Club takes its sweet time building up the characters and world, to the point you almost forget it's supposed to be a horror game. It was a single moment that made this game go viral at the time, but that moment needed all of that context in order to work and hit hard. So that's how you pull off the initial shock part of this trope masterfully. And for the second part, vibes is the key word. The ominous feeling that permeates the rest of the story can be achieved in any ways, but the most vanilla way would be to keep things normal, but now with the player/audience knowing that there is something wrong. A great example of this in action could be the first season of Invincible, when after the first episode everyone knows the true nature of Omni-Man except for the characters. So you always have this feeling of uneasiness because you know there is something wrong. This is not your average Saturday morning hero cartoon. If you want to implement this trope into your story, you just gotta pay attention, otherwise it might end up cheesy, forced, or just plain predictable. So here's the separate parts of it. The initial world building, focusing on making the audience feel comfortable even though they know a twist is coming. The moment of shock, when the story suddenly dives into the horror aspects, and the constant eeriness of having something so cozy be corrupted, yet not completely so. If you pull off all these aspects perfectly, you'll have successfully implemented this popular trope into your story. Subscribe for more videos like this, I have a course, link is in the description, and keep writing, cause the best is yet to come.